Made a little. Her mouth made a little "oh," but then she spaced out again. I didn't really think she turned out to be sick or anything like that. She's basically in good shape, I said. I wouldn't expect to turn up anything clinically. She appears to be a healthy 2-year-old. He looked at his clipboard. The reason I brought her in is I'm concerned about stuff that happened to her a while ago. She wasn't taken care of well. Dr. Pelinowski looked at me, clicking his ballpoint pen. I'm a foster parent, I said. And then he raised his eyebrows and nodded. It was a miracle, this new word that satisfied everyone. You're saying that she was subjected to deprivation or abuse in the biological parent's home? He said. His maid technique seemed to be telling you what you just said. Yes, I think she was abused, and that she was. I didn't know how to put this. That she was molested. In a sexual way. Dr. Palinowski took in this information without appearing to notice. He was scribbling something on the so-called encounter form. I waited until he finished, thinking that I was going to have to say it again, but he said, I'll give her a complete exam, but again, I wouldn't expect to turn up anything now. This child has been in your care for 5 months? More or less, I said. Yes. While he examined her, he explained about abrasions and contusions and the healing process. I thought of how I handled Jolene Shanks exactly this way, as calm as breakfast toast, while her dead husband lay 10 feet away under a sheet. After this amount of time, we might see behavioral evidence, Dr. P said, but there is no residual physical damage. He finished scribbling on the form and decided it would be a good idea to do a skeletal survey and that sometime soon we ought to do her immunizations up to date. I was curious to see the x-ray room, which was down the hall in another part of the office. Everything was large and clean, and they had a machine that turned out the x-rays instantly like a Polaroid camera. I don't believe Dr. Pelinowski really understood how lucky he was. I used to spend entire afternoons in a little dark room developing those things, sopping the stiff plastic sheets through one and another basin of liquid, and then hanging them up on a line with tiny green clothespins. I used to tell Mama it was nothing more than glorified laundry. We had to wait a while to see him again. Well, he saw another patient and then read Turtle's x-rays. I hung around asking the technician questions and showing Turtle where the x-rays came out. Though machines weren't really her line. She had one of her old wrestling holds on my shoulder. When we were called back to Dr. Pelinowski's office again, he looked just ever so slightly shaken up. What is it? I asked him. All I could think of was brain tumors, I suppose, from hanging around Luann, who had learned all she knew about medicine from General Hospital. He laid some of the x-rays against the window. Dr. Pelinowski's office window looked out onto a garden full of round stones and cactus. In the dark negatives, I could see Turtle's thin white bones in her skull, and it gave me the same chill Luann must have felt to see her living mother's name carved on a gravestone. I shivered inside my skin. These are healed fractures. Some of them compounded, he said, pointing with his silver pen. He moved carefully through the arm and leg bone, and then to the hands, which he said were an excellent index of age. On the basis of height and weight, he assumed that she was around 24 months, he said. But the development of cartilage in the carpals and metacarpals indicated that she was closer to 3. 3 years? Yes. He seemed almost undecided about telling me this. Sometimes in an environment of physical or emotional deprivation, a child will simply stop growing, although certain internal maturation does continue. It's a condition we call failure to thrive. But she's thriving now. I don't know, I buy her clothes. Well, yes, of course, the condition is completely reversible. Of course, I said. He put up more of the x-rays in the window, saying things like spiral fibular fracture here, and excellent healing, and some contraindications for psychomotor development. I couldn't really listen. I looked through the bones to the garden on the other side. There was a cactus with bushy arms and a coat of yellow spines as thick as fur. A bird had built her nest in it. In and out She flew among the horrible spiny branches, never once hesitating. You could just imagine how she made a home in there. Maddie had given me the whole day off, so I had arranged to meet Luann at the zoo after Turtle's appointment. We took the bus. Maddie and I hadn't gotten around to fixing the ignition of my car, so starting it up was a production I saved for special occasions. On the way over, I tried to erase the words failure to fry from my mind. I prepared myself, instead, for the experience of being with Luann and the kids in a brand new set of hazards. There would be stories of elephants going berserk and trampling their keepers, of children's little hands snapped off and swallowed by whole who knows what seemingly innocent animal. When I walked up to the gate and saw her standing there with tears streaming down her face, I automatically checked Dwayne Ray in his stroller to see if any of his parts were missing. People were having to detour around her to get through the turnstile, so I led her to one side. She sobbed and talked at the same time. He says he's going to join up with any rodeo that will take a one-legged clown, which I know isn't right because the clown's the hardest job. They jump around and distract them, so they won't trample on the cowboy's head. I was confused. Was there an elephant somewhere in the story? Luann, honey, you're not making any sense. Do you want to go home? She shook her head. Then should we go on into the zoo? She nodded. I managed to get everybody through the turnstile and settled on a bench in the shade between the duck pond and the giant tortoises. The sound of water trickling over a little waterfall into the duck pond made it seem cool. I tried to get the kids distracted long enough for Luann to tell me what was up. Look, Turtle, look at those old big turtles, I said. The word childhood identity crisis from one of Luann's magazines sprang to my mind. But turtles seemed far more interested in the nibbled fruit halves strewn around their pen. Apple, she said. She seemed recovered from her doctor's visit. He said something about the Colorado-Montana circuit, which I don't even know what that means, only that he's leaving town. And he said he might not be sending any checks for a while until he got on his feet. He actually said on his foot. Can you believe that? The way Angel sees himself, it's like he's an artificial leg with a person attached. A woman on a nearby bench stopped reading and tilted her head back a little, the way people do when they want to overhear a conversation. She had on white sneakers, white shorts, and a visor. It looked as if she must have been on her way to a country club to play tennis before some wrongful bus change landed her here. It's her husband that's the problem, I told the woman. He's a former rodeo man. Taylor, Luann whispered. But the woman ignored us and took a drag from her cigarette, which she balanced beside her on the front edge of the bench. She looked at her newspaper and folded back the front page. It showed a large color of Liz Taylor, with a black man in a silver vest and no shirt. And there was a huge block headline that said, World's Youngest Mom to Be, Infant Pregnant at Birth. Apparently the headline wasn't related to the picture. A kid with orange foam rubber plugs in his ears whizzed by on a skateboard. Another whizzed right behind him. They had a fancy way of tipping up their boards to go over the curbs. They shouldn't allow those in here. Somebody would get killed, Luann said, blowing her nose. I noticed that one of the giant tortoises in the pen was pursuing another one around and around a clump of shrubby palm trees. So what about Angel? I asked. A woman in a flowery dress sat down on the bench with the country club woman. She had very dark, tightly wrinkled skin and wore enormous green high-heeled pumps. The country club's woman's cigarette on the bench between them waved a little boundary line of smoke. He said there would be papers assigned for the divorce, Luann said. So what's the problem exactly? I didn't mean to be unkind. I really didn't know. Well, what am I going to do? Well, to be honest, I don't think it much matters what you do. It probably doesn't make any difference what kind of divorce you get, or even if you get one at all. The man is gone, honey. If you stop sending checks, I don't imagine there's anything to be done. And not if he's out riding the range in God's country. I guess you have to look for a job sooner or later. Lance started sobbing again. Who would want to hire me? I can't do anything. You don't necessarily have to know how to do something for a job to get a job, I reasoned. I never made a French fry in my life before I got hired at the Burger Derby. She blew her nose again. So how'd she get born pregnant? The green shoes woman asked the woman with the newspaper. It was twins, a boy and a girl, the woman told her. They had sexual intercourse in the womb. Doctor says the chances against it are 1,000,000 to 1. Yeah, the green shoes woman said in a tired way. She bent over and shuffled through a large paper shopping bag, which was printed with a bright paisley pattern and had sturdy-looking green handles. All three of us waited for her to say something more or to produce some wonderful answer out of her bag, but she didn't. Luann said to me in a quieter voice, You know, the worst thing about it is that he wouldn't ask me to come with him. Well, how in the world could you go with him? What about Dwayne Ray? It's not that I want to, but he could have asked. He did say if I wanted to come along, he wouldn't stop me. But he wouldn't actually say he wanted me to. I don't follow you exactly. You know, that was always the trouble with Angel. I never really felt like he would put up a fight for me. I would have left him a long time ago, but I was scared to death he'd just say, Bye, don't let the door hit your butt on the way out. Well, maybe it's not that he doesn't want you, Luann. Maybe he just got a better sense than to ask you and a 4-month-old baby to come along on the Montana-Colorado circuit or whatever. I could just see it. Dwayne Ray growing up to be one of those tattooed midgets that do somersaults in the sideshow and sell the popcorn at intermissions. It's not a circus, for God's sakes, it's a rodeo. Luann honked in her handkerchief and laughed in spite of herself. At the edge of the pond there was a gumball machine full of peanuts for feeding to the ducks, I presumed. But these ducks are so well fed that even where peanuts were scattered by the fistful, at the water's edge they just paddled right on by with beady bored eyes. Turtle dug one out of the mud and brought it to me. Bean, she said. This is a peanut, I told her. Beanut. She made trip after trip collecting peanuts and mounting them in a pile. Dwayne Ray in his stroller was sleeping soundly through his first zoo adventure. I couldn't stop thinking about the x-rays and how Turtle's body was carrying around secret scars that would always be there. I wanted to talk to Luann about it, but this wasn't the time. So why are you taking his side? Luann wanted to know. I'm not taking his side. Whose side? Yours too. Or at least you're not taking mine. Whenever I complain about it, hell, you won't agree with me that he's a scumbucket. You just listen and don't say anything. I picked up a green bottle cap and threw it in the duck pond. The ducks didn't even turn their heads. Luann, I said, in high school, I used to lose friends that way like crazy. You think he's a scumbag now? But sooner or later you might want him back. And then you'd be too embarrassed to look at me. To look me in the eye and admit you're still in love with this jerk whose anatomical parts we've been laughing about for the last 2 months. It's over between me and Angel. I know it is. Just the same, I don't want you to have to choose him or me. She dug through her purse looking for a clean handkerchief. I just can't get over him leaving like that. When? Now or last October? I was starting to get annoyed. He moved out over 6 months ago, Luann. Did you think he just stepped out for some fresh air? It's April now, for God's sakes. Did you see that? Luann pointed at Turtle. Her head bobbed up like an apple on a string, and her eyes fixed on me as if she had seen the Lord's incarnate. What's up, Turtle? I asked, but she just stared fearfully from her pile of peanuts.